What I kind of wanted to first start kind of talking about is looking back at last year just a little bit. We came off with 6 teams last year that were ranked in the top 20 nationally. Had the men's basketball obviously made it to the Sweet 16. Women's basketball having the opportunity to win the Big 12 championship, go to the NCAAs. Women's soccer having a national runner-up championship season. You had rifle winning their 5th straight, 19th overall rifle championship. Football, 10-win season in football. So, those are just some of the things that were happening last year, from the playing fields to playing courts. Academically, overall, we had 14 of the 18 teams that we sponsor that had overall GPAs above a 3.0 for the respective teams. Overall student athlete body, 3.15 grade point average. So we're not only performing, on the courts and the fields and the wrestling mats, we're also, performing academically, and that's very important. You all have heard me talk about it before. As an athletic director, obviously the wins, the losses hurt. The wins are something that we celebrate. And one of those celebrations for me as an athletic director is celebrating those student athletes who graduate each year as well. And that's considered my win come May. And that's a big focus of mine and the coaching staff. This year we'll have 10 student athletes in football that will walk out onto that field here in a couple weeks that have already gotten their degrees. And that number's a good number. Can we improve on that? That's what we want to do, is continue to improve on that number as well. So, a lot of good things. Baseball, obviously I didn't mention, return to the NCAAs for the first time in a number of years. So, what I'm mentioning this is that I just don't want this to be a one-year anomaly. This is expectations. This is where we should be each and every year. How do we continue to grow as a department? And have other teams that, make it to the NCAAs, make it into the final rankings for their respective sports. So, that's our goal. My goal as a department as we move forward is not looking back and saying, oh, wow, 2016-17 academic year was a great year. Let's remember that. What we need to do is continue to build off of that each and every year and make sure that, again, we're performing not only in the courts and fields, but we're performing in the classroom. Also, student athletes can, performing as well as in the community and their community service activities. We want to continue to focus on the well-being of the student athletes, sports nutrition, our academic services areas, the different things that we offer, our student athletes. When I came here, this was getting close to starting my 3rd year. The thing I wanted to focus on, and we looked at as a mission statement, is asking the question of the department why we are here. Well, what's our purpose? What's our why? And our why is because of these student athletes, and how do we make a difference in their lives each and every day, not only here at West Virginia, but looking at the big picture nationally as a director of athletics through the NCAA process. How do we make this better for student athletes overall? So, we'll continue to look and foster on that. The thing that I'm continue to be proud of is, from a financial standpoint as a department, we've continued to be in a very good financial situation, continue to operate in the black. That's my goal, is continue to do that. We've had a change, and I'll be bringing in a new Chief Financial Officer, Simon Dover, which was announced a couple weeks ago, to help run that area for me. Michael Zool, as you all know, left and went to Rutgers. So it gives us an opportunity to kind of reevaluate and move forward, with the financial aspects of the department. That's something that we're proud of as well. Most importantly, and you've heard me talk about this a number of times, is, the facility improvements. What's been done to the stadium, currently, is something I think has been a great addition to the university, for our fan base, for Mountaineer Nation as a whole. And, my goal is to continue to focus on our facilities, continue to improve our facilities, and have the vision, to be able to go forward, not only with football, but our other sports, Olympic sports, to make sure, and also in the Coliseum for basketballs, is to continue to press forward with those facility renovations. That takes time, that takes money, and obviously we have to have a plan put together so that the Mountaineer Athletic Club has the opportunity to go out and be able to fundraise and have a vision what we're fundraising for. So, we're going to continue looking at that and working on our facilities plan. The West Side Concourse is on schedule. I have an opportunity, I think it's media on Friday, that you all will take the tour like you did on the east side. Again, I haven't been over there in a month or so, but from looking at it from the outside, I think, and I can say this is, being here or close to here as a student in 1983, but when this stadium opened in 1980, I think this stadium looks the best it's ever looked in its history. The concourses, the widening from the fan enhancements, the restrooms, the additional concession stands, the field itself with the crown taken out, is something special for our student athletes now. Probably 95 or even higher percentage of the practices are up at the practice field, and now going into that stadium for our student athletes is something special. That's not where they practice each and every day. So great improvement, great strides have been made in that area. I happened to be at the Children's Hospital ceremony last week with Jeff Hostetler and that recognition of the Resource Center and overlooking the football field and looking at it from that angle with the green space out front and obviously all the additional renovations, the new video board going up in the north end zone. Mountaineer Field is something pretty special, and that's what we want it to be, and want us to all be proud of the stadium, and when we come to a game and feel very proud of that's our home, and we're going to take care of it and continue to build off of that. New projects, again, I mentioned there briefly about looking at our facilities master plan. My theory with this is, you have to continue to build and look at the future and not look at today, but look at 3-5 years down the road on who we can be as a department. And part of that is continuing to look at our facilities master plan. Here in this area specifically, we have an architectural firm that's looking at redoing the medical area outside the locker room. We also have them looking at renovating the locker room and then renovating the Pushkar Center as a whole for new team rooms, new offices, and all that. So, we're getting close to having that to be able to roll out sometime this fall, probably late fall to look at. But we're excited about that opportunity of what that's going to look like, how that's a game changer for our football program. We talk about, and you read a lot in the media about arms races and facilities arms race. And, you can call it that, but at the same time, this is where our student athletes train, they compete, they spend a lot of time in these facilities. And my goal is to make these first-class facilities to obviously retain coaches, recruit the best student athletes, and have them feel that this is their home. I don't think it's any different than what universities are doing for the student body population. I joke and look back at the rec fields and the rec center when I was here was the Stansbury Hall. Obviously the rec center we have here is state of the art and great for our students in general, and I want the same thing for our student athletes as we continue to move forward with that. Back over at the Coliseum area, we'll continue to focus on our Olympic sport weight room. We got a little bit behind on that with the renovations to the Coliseum. They're a little bit overrun on the budget aspect of digging into a 47-year-old building. Costs that we didn't project that was going to happen. So we ran a little bit over there. And that may be a good thing in a way, because now it gives us a time to refocus. And why it gives us time to refocus, it looks like the track and aquatic center is coming to fruition. Hopefully something will be announced very soon about that from the university side. I couldn't be more pleased from the athletic department, but from a community as a whole, what that will mean to Morgantown, from health aspect, from a recreational aspect for our community. The track, and the swimming pool will help our high schools and other events that can be brought into Morgantown. The track will also have a walking track on the outside, have a cross-country track up there as well. So it's going to add a lot to the Morgantown community, and this is a Morgantown community-based project, and that's what's excited about this project as a whole, is bringing everybody together into this project. And it's going to be as fine as a facility that you're going to see in the country. So we're working on the final stages of that, and hopefully in the coming days or weeks we'll have an official announcement coming about the aquatic center. The going into this year, really from a student athlete standpoint, the biggest thing that we're all adjusting with from an NCAA standpoint is the new time management aspect that was adopted last year for our student athletes. And our compliance staff has worked with our coaches, worked with our student athletes. There's more transparency to the student athlete side, more clear definitions of what a day off is, and what they can do, what's required and not required. So we'll continue. I think it's a work in progress across the country. It will be a work in progress here, that we continue to work with our student athletes on the new legislation and have them have the ability to integrate themselves more into the student body, have more time off, on clear days, and what is mandated versus voluntary, and what they can and cannot do, and what's counted within those time limits. So that's something that we'll continue working with. The last couple of days, I've been at Big 12 meetings. We have a meeting in New Orleans at this time of year. We started that about 3 years ago, and that was obviously to build relationships and our partnership with the Sugar Bowl, which is our tie-in for our highest team. They've had a great tradition in New Orleans with the bowl to be tied in with the SEC for a number of years. The Big 12 is new to tie into that, so it gives us an opportunity to go meet with their executive committee and their board and build relationships as we move forward. And so that's a meeting, and we then as athletic directors meet for about 5 or 6 hours yesterday morning. There really wasn't anything earth-shattering on the agenda. A lot of things that we talked about is the football championship game and some of the things we have to do within the conference's bylaws of the travel squad, who's going to be permitted, which a lot of times that's treated just as a regular season game. And if you don't know, there's a travel squad limit, in Big 12 games of 70 student athletes, one game a year. You're allowed to take any senior on top of that 70 that's traveling, and that's what we talked about. And we'll bring that back to our September meeting of adjusting those bylaws. The most important thing, of the championship game as a conference as a whole is, obtaining that 13th data point. And that's why we established the championship game. Our championship game will be unique compared to others. It will be our true top 1 and 2 teams in the conference. We decided that. I think we've talked about that some, and not splitting into divisions and having a team from whatever division play, and regardless. We looked at the 10 teams, take those 10 teams, rank them, 1 through 10, and 1 and 2 is going to play for that championship game. So that's completely different than the other Power 5 conferences in their championship game. It makes us unique in that regard. And, the questions I know that you all have asked, some of you individually, the conference, I think, obviously, is focused on having that team in the college football playoff. But and then the preseason rankings came out. There wasn't another conference out there that had 50% of its teams ranked in the top 25. So, football is good in the Big 12. We're projected 6th in the Big 12, and we're ranked 20th in the preseason polls. Now, we have to do our job, and Coach Holgerson knows that he has to do his job and go out and win those games. And our hopes as a conference is that we'll have 5 teams in the final rankings of the top 25. That's what we want, and obviously have that team in the college football playoff as well. So, we feel very good the way we're heading, and the championship game, how it will help us elevate our football in the Big 12 and not be talked about not having the 13th data point like every other conference out there in the Power 5. Continuing on with football, the Virginia Tech game, there's a true excitement building for the football opener. The fans are excited. We've sold our allotment of tickets. I know Virginia Tech has sold their allotment of tickets. This is the 2nd straight year we've opened with the Power 5 institution. Last year was Missouri. This year will be Virginia Tech, and then next year we open in Charlotte with Tennessee. So, we sat down and looked at the schedule and think that's important for us as a university, is continuing playing out other Power 5 institutions and, having 9 conference games. Again, unlike some other conferences who only play 8 conference games, continue looking at that and making sure our strength of schedule is strong, so that when you're looking at the college football playoff, that they look and say, their strength of schedule is up to par and even is stronger than a lot of the other competitors out there that's looking for that. Women's soccer, obviously starting the season, preseason number 1. That's a great accomplishment for Coach Nikki Izzo-Brown and her program, continuing to build that program and hopefully have a repeat of last year of going to the College Cup, and hopefully the outcome is a little bit different this year, of instead of finishing runner-up, being national champions. And I know that's her goal, and her team's goal is continue to compete at the highest levels, and she's done a great job of doing that and moving that program in the right direction. One other thing I wanted to mention that you all may have written on already, but going into the football season, this will be the first season as an institution that will start the clear bag policy. Again, we've continued to look at the safety of our fans and look across the country of what's happening and what's working. Obviously, we've adopted the NFL policy with clear bag policy. This is not to inconvenience our fans in any way. This is to actually help provide safety as much as we can for our fans. So, to make sure that they're coming in and it's a faster process, through the lines of being able to see in that bag from our CSC crews, of looking for the safety and the well-being of Mountaineer Nation. So, many institutions, I think 7 of the 10 institutions in the Big 12 have a clear bag policy. I think as a conference as a whole, the SEC just adopted it for the entire league. And I'm not sure what other leagues are doing out there, but more and more institutions are going to the clear bag policy. And I think most of our fans who have been to, baseball, football, whatever, are used to that process. I will say, looking at some of the things on Twitter, this is not a money grab. I heard people out there want to sell bags. We're not selling the bags. I mean, it's a $6 bag. We've also put out, a lot of educational materials of fans who diaper bags. Can I get everything in this bag? And we've put out videos to show that process, that everything that's in the diaper bag you can get in the clear bag, as well. So it's it's the step in the right direction for our fans as a whole. When you have 60,000 people showing up for a football game, I've been told, and it's interesting. Most people are worried about where they're going to park, where their hot dog's going to be, and how they're getting in the game. I'm worried about 60,000 hot dogs being hot, 60,000 parking spots, and 60,000 people being safe. So that's why we've implemented the policy and continue to move forward. As Michael mentioned, with the West Side, the new gates, I think the fan flow. We'll get much better, multiple gates to be able to be used. We ran into some issues last year I think we're all creatures of habit, and first game, everyone wants to come in the north end zone in one gate, and it got kind of congested. And I think throughout the season that obviously improved, and now with the west side being completely done, those gate entrances, all that should speed up as well. So with that, that's all really I had just to talk about. I know you all have never been afraid of questions, so I'll turn it over to you and see what you have to ask.
Shane, master plan, you talked a little bit about the new track. Old track, parking, all those issues at the Coliseum. What's the plan there?
We have an architect we're going to bring over this fall to start looking at that. It could be into parking. It goes back to what I was talking about of our weight room and all that. At one point we had it closer to the Coliseum. Do we tie that in and make it more of a sports performance center, where the medical area for the Olympic sports, the academic area, everything goes into one building? Do we put it there? How's that tie into the shell building for ease of access? If you put the weight room there to tie in, so if they want to use the track, indoor track area inside the shell to train. So those are things that we're going to look at and try to come up with a plan by the end of fall of what's our next step.
Since you brought up track and cross country, is there any plan at all in the near future to bring back men in track and cross country?
Right now, I don't have any plans of adding any additional sports. We have the 18, sports. So, my focus is elevating our 18 programs to a national basis and recognition. So everybody's competing for NCAAs, everybody's competing for Big 12s, and men's soccer obviously competing for the MAC championship. So, my focus with that is not by adding teams, it's providing resources and the facilities to be able to elevate our all of our programs across the board that we currently have, to that. Some of the discussion that we have yesterday is, again, focusing on, what's happening in the collegiate world. And, one of the biggest things is the lawsuits out there, and the Jenkins lawsuit that has continued to be talking about of, free market and what that means for college athletics. And the thing that you have to focus on is, if something would happen in that regard, how does that change what we're doing as an institution? We only have so much, revenue, and to be able to operate off of that, how's that change, and how's that change for the Olympic sports? What, people really aren't talking about is, if that happens, what happens to, we're the training ground for our Olympic sport programs, Olympics in general. 70-something% of, the Olympians all come from college institutions. Another 20% of that we're training for international students. So, what happens? I mean, that's the big picture. Obviously, no one has that crystal ball that you look into, but, overall for our Olympic sports, we probably spend over $2 billion a year in training our, Olympians across the board in Division I, II, and III institutions. So, I think that has a lot of people, thinking, from a sport program standpoint, what does that mean in the future, for college athletics as this case continues to evolve.
Shane, you mentioned the Big 12 and lawsuits, and I was wondering, did you guys touch upon the Baylor situation, and have you guys examined what you do here as far as?
Yeah, we've absolutely. I mean, that's something that's always on your radar, and my background coming from the compliance and governance background, you want to educate yourself and learn from the misfortune of others. So, have we taken steps to try to educate our student athletes? Absolutely, in each and every scenario. Do we educate our coaches? Absolutely. They know if they have information that they need to report it to their appropriate individuals in the athletic department. In turn, then we'll report to the appropriate individuals downtown administration and have them look into it. So we continue to to try to educate and foster that type of communication within the department overall. And again, we've looked at the North Carolina case. We went through an internal audit last year with our own academic area, making sure what the class sizes look like, how many student athletes are in classes, and our goal is to try to have less than 25% or roughly 20% of the class composition be student athletes and no more than that. So yeah, I think we're always looking at those situations and making sure where we stand as an institution and try to avoid the missteps along the way.
When you hear that Baylor wasn't drug testing, is that news that you guys might have had a year ago, but just in the stages of evaluating potential punishment and withholding money and all that, or is this drip of information reaching you guys at the same time we're hearing about it?
It came news to me, to be honest with you, Alan. I wasn't aware of it. We really didn't talk about it as a league. As a league, we talk about the Big 12 test, and we know that. The NCAA test, and of course we know about that. And then is an institution. And honestly, I've been through discussions with athletic directors in various leagues about, what you're testing and what's your philosophy. We have to be our own, and, we have to do what's right for West Virginia University, what's our values. And, we have modified in the last couple of years our drug policy, and we've made it more rehabilitative as opposed to punitive. There's still punitive associated with it. I don't think our student athlete body is any different than our student body. There's you're in college. There's those issues. But what we have to do is educate our student athletes to the issues of drug use and how it impairs from academically to athletically, those issues, and obviously follow through with, our structure that we have as a policy. And the most important thing is if we have a policy, you have to follow your policy, and that's what we're going to do. We're going to follow that policy. But I can't worry about, well, we drug test this many times and they don't drug test this. What's best for West Virginia University and working through that, and what's best for our student athletes.
Shane, the role of an AD when it comes to legal problems for a student athlete, what should your role be? The school president, the coach?
It's communication among all of us, from, the issues that you're dealing with, here recently. I leave the decisions up to the coach. Obviously, I'm in those communication with the coach, and if I don't feel he or she has done the right thing, obviously, then that's when we communicate and in making sure that we're all on the same page. But, first and foremost is, when you're dealing with these cases, nothing's cookie cutter. Each case is different. It's not just, well, they had this incident. You look at a number of things. They've been in trouble elsewhere. Are they doing well academically? Have they been in trouble? So you take everything in totality and you look at it, just not one isolated incident that there was a misstep. So, sometimes it's looked at as saying, well, this case is treated different, this one will. It's not looked at in totality. You have to look at the big picture, and that's what we all do, and, leave that to the coach, and then we communicate, and then he or she makes that decision, and obviously then that decision is, made aware of to the president. But what, the other step is that we're completely out of it is the student conduct step. Obviously student conduct gets involved, and we're completely out of that process, and we're not going to get involved in that process. And then that student athlete is treated like a normal student, and they have to go through the same steps as any other student. And we don't influence that whatsoever. We stay out of it, and that's between the student and student conduct downtown, and then they handle it from there.
Shane, can I go back to the drug testing thing you said for a second?
Yes.
Well, one, schools, conferences, NCAA, there's people who think that one may look the other way sometimes because there's two other watchdogs on that stuff, and then sometimes the testing rules can be obscured, whatever. What impact do you think that has on problems or enforcement? And then the changes you made, punitive, rehabilitative, and if you're allowed to say, what are you doing now?
We'll go back to the NCAAs. I mean, we don't know when they're coming. Obviously, we get it less than 24 hours. It's completely random. They ask for rosters. They do their selection on a random basis. The same thing with the Big 12 conference. There's been times that we've tested the next week or whatever, the NCAAs come in and no one shares the information. When are you testing? When, there's not that communication. They just randomly, pick, and the conference does it. Again, it's random, but I would say it's at least a couple times each semester. The NCAAs is, basically the same thing. So you don't know the timing. We don't communicate and say, we just tested last week. As a student athlete, you're randomly chosen as well. So, it's like you could be chosen for an institutional based upon squad list, turn around, and all of a sudden you're chosen the next week and the following week, so that it is completely random from that. Yeah, our drug test policy is online. One thing that we looked at when I got here and my previous institution, I went through 18-month study of working through it and working with individuals who counsel student athletes and what's working and what's not working. So we've treated it more as rehabilitative. They have an issue. So what can we do to help that student athlete? So we went from just a straight 3-strike penalty, you're out, to here are requirements that you have to go to. One thing, and if you compare it, that I didn't think was right is, our initial or original drug testing policy, I think it was the second test that you were removed from all team activities, practice, competition, for the 10%. I didn't believe in that. I think now you're putting that student athlete in total isolation from his team. Do I think they still should be part of team activities, practicing, obviously their academics, all that? Yes, I absolutely believe in that. And the punitive part, yes, they're going to sit out the 10% of the games. That's in our policy. But should they be isolated for that 2 weeks or 3 weeks during that entire time? I didn't think that's the right thing for the student athlete. So you go through the process of, different things that's required, the counseling and going to those counseling sessions and trying to help the student athlete. A lot of these cases just didn't start their freshman year in college. It's been ongoing, and how can we be part of the solution as opposed to part of the problem? So, that's where we started making some adjustments and trying to help in that regard.
Can you see, because the NFL, for example, is wrestling with the situation with players now wanting to legalize marijuana for pain use, I mean, can you envision down the road the colleges are going to have to answer that same question?
I think those questions are always asked, but at the same time, you have to look at, obviously we're different than the NFL, but at the same time, I read articles and, shows those who are under drug use using marijuana, of course, don't perform as well in classes. Their hand-eye coordination is not as fast. I don't know the NFL policy. I know there's some things during the season and out of the season and how that all applies. But again, it's you have states legalizing marijuana. How does that all play into the part of this? But I think that again, it's educating the student athletes, currently on the process, and it's not healthy for them. If they want to be at their optimal performance, it's eating right, it's sleeping right, it's working hard, it's going to class, and doing the right things. Working hard, brings great results, and it's a process, and part of that process is doing the right things, and that goes for outside extracurricular activities.
Shane, with these neutral site games, you got obviously one this year and one next year. As I look way into the future, I don't see an opening for one until maybe 2025.
Yeah, we
Is
had,
that something?
2020, is that right? Florida State?
Oh, that's right. Yeah, exactly.
We have that, and then it'll be a 4 or 5 year gap. I think the next opening, Alan, is 2025 is the next opportunity to look at a neutral site game.
And those spots are rare, but I mean, apparently you're open to keeping that process going. You know?
Yeah, I think it's overall good for the program. You look at the excitement that the Virginia Tech has built in, opening it up on prime time on Sunday night, Labor Day weekend, what that means. Really the promotions hadn't even started rolling out for football on ESPN, and I think in the next 2 weeks you're going to start seeing that, and you're going to have West Virginia plastered, a whole lot on those promotions. So that's good, and overall, that Sunday night game has been one of the highest, if not the highest rated game in college football. You're setting home Saturday or Sunday night. There's a lot of games that played on Saturday. You got some of the NFL things happening there on early Sunday, but nothing on Sunday night. So this gives us that opportunity to be on ABC and that national spotlight. So again, I think it goes back to branding of your product, and we want to be the best, and so opening up against one of the best is something that I think we all look forward to.
How competitive is it to get one of those spots? Is it basically you and the other school doing it, and then you?
No, it's usually they're usually a third party. I mean, it's you start usually you're dealing with, say, the Fed, people at the Redskins, or you're dealing with the folks in Charlotte, or Gary Stoke in Atlanta, and saying, hey, we have an interest, and can we get in this game, and who can we get on the other side, and they're kind of working on the other side, and then obviously then you have the financial guarantees and the ticket guarantees and working those financial details out. But again, you have good success, which West Virginia has, and they look at you. I mean, we're looking at our allotment, and hopefully we're a sellout. We're close to a sellout. I know from our allotment we sold out in Virginia Tech, so that's going to be a big game at FedEx Field, and I think Tennessee next year in Charlotte. I mean, with both fan bases, that should be a sellout. We did well, going to Atlanta 2014 against Alabama. So, I think these, when I say promoters, the people that put these games on, like West Virginia, and they've been good participants in fan participating as well as television exposure.
With Virginia Tech scheduling, Virginia Tech's really the first traditional rival that WVU has played in quite some time. And obviously you've scheduled Pitt and Penn State and Maryland and Virginia Tech again. Is there any effort to schedule Syracuse, Louisville, UVA, anything like that down the road in late 2020s?
Yeah, Penn State was also in there. Right now there has not, at least my talking to the fan base is trying to gauge, obviously, the Pitt, the Virginia Techs, the Penn States, the Marylands, that's kind of our footprint. Obviously, the Louisville, we started building a rivalry with in the Big East during that time. But, looking out and trying to balance the schedule, I haven't looked out. Honestly, there's, I'm basically 10 years out. I had an institution contact me last week or 2 weeks ago now that was looking at 2035 and 2036. And I'm like, there's no way I'm looking that far out. The most I may go is 27, 28 and start looking at that, but I'm not even in a hurry to look at that. But you got to look at, I look at it and say, okay, if this all goes well, I think the last time we have played Virginia Tech is in 2022. So do you put them back on 26, 27? So that's kind of the rotation that you kind of look at. But, Louisville, somebody like that, you could get in a neutral site game instead of having a home and home or something like that is picking up.
With scheduling, obviously those Pitt games are going to be in September. Were there any discussions or any ever in the Big 12 about maybe having Thanksgiving be a rivalry week for say a team like Texas, who may schedule Texas A&M again without having to play them in September, or maybe playing?
Looking at it, we have had some of that, but then at the same time, from a scheduling standpoint, they're trying to, again, get the best matchups because we know that's rivalry weekend. So, I guess you look at Oklahoma and Texas, the Red River, that's earlier in the season and built in there. So, I'm not sure. You don't have Kansas and Missouri playing any longer, and, Texas A&M. So, those are things that, in future, but first of all, you have to get both sides to agree to play that game. And, the good part about us is we've had luck, of having, some of our former traditional rivalries, want to schedule those games. And, I've talked to Virginia Tech about later on already. And obviously we'll see how the Pitt series comes along and, having them more often. And, same thing with the Marylands and the Penn States as well. I get a lot of questions about Ohio State. And so even though that it's not been a traditional rivalry, it's just a location standpoint. So, those things you have to look at, and, it's more difficult than it really appears on the surface of trying, you're really putting together a puzzle, what works in their schedule, what works in ours, what weeks, how you lay it out is something important. You don't want an overschedule, at the same time you don't want to underschedule, so it's, where do you have that balance?
Any effort to think about rescheduling the Coal Bowl or the Capital Classic moving forward?
We haven't had that discussion. So, we're in basketball, we're focused on having Pitt back on the schedule. We've talked about, the in basketball with Marshall and, the Capital Classic. That's all changed through the years. Obviously, that was once it was started during the legislative session in January, and it was moved back and all that. We've talked about, there was a lot of the discussion. If they want to play, we'll play them here, but there hasn't been a lot of interest in that. So,
Shane, with regard to the neutral site stuff, everything evolves. Everything's about TV. You've got basketball games on aircraft carriers and football games and NASCAR tracks. How fun and how exotic can you think about, kind of right field stuff where it might be appealing if you have an idea that maybe isn't out there?
Honestly, I've never come up with, some of the promoters have come up with some of those crazy things. Some have worked, some have not. The battleship things, all of a sudden started working, and all of a sudden the moisture, and now you're looking to safety and welfare of your student athletes. Well, that's maybe not the best thing to do with the moisture on the floor. I've had some conversations about, our potential interest in Bristol, and the right matchup and all that in the right year. And again, they're not going to look at that, as a every year deal, but they reached out and asked if there would be an interest if they decided to do it again, if it works within, our schedule and what we can do and the right opponent. That may be something different for us and, for Mountaineer Nation. Obviously, it's an easy drive to get there. And so, I'm open to the ideas. Do I sit at my desk and think, what can we do to, be different, and do we promote it? I got enough other issues to deal with.
Shane, on the sort of like the next data point you and I talked, could you share where we might be in this on-again, off-again conversation with sort of the Big 12 network and what you and the other athletic directors and the consultant has sort of, it seems like it starts, then it stops, and it starts, and it stops. I'm just curious where the cycle might be.
Yeah, I think we went through that total exercise last year, and obviously part of that exercise was the potential of adding new members, and the discussion kind of stopped at that because I think that the network, vision has changed. What is it going to be? Technology keeps advancing, and what's it going to look like in 3 years, 5 years, and we had some time to make adjustments. I'm not sure. I think we all sit back and say, is a TV network the right thing? And our consultants are telling us, pump the brakes a little bit. Let's not get overzealous, because I'm not sure that the networks are going to be the same, in 3 to 5 years as they are today. So, it's still being researched, talked about with our current television partners of where all this is heading. But, you know, I have an 18-year-old and a 14-year-old. They don't watch TV. They watch their phones. I have 60-inch TVs in my house, and they walk around with 5-inch screen. And they sit at the table. They carry it around. They have their headphones in. So that's our future. You know, again, old people like me, I turn on the TV. I'm not going to look at, I can't even see it to begin with, so let alone, you know, try to look at a 5-inch screen. So, you know, what does that mean? You know, you look at how our fans consume, you know, just overall. I mean, from the radio and all that, that's all changed, you know, as well. So, you know, now we can stream on our computers, and, you know, we have, you know, through IMG, we have the call-in number. So you're in your car and you can call into the number. I've used that a number of times. That way I don't have to, you know, switch and find channels. Listened to, seeing Dan over there, I listened to I was out of town Easter weekend and listened all the way from Virginia all the way to Morgantown through my Bluetooth on my phone on the radio. Disconnected one time. You know, that was one dead area on 79. Then you recall it and pull it back up. It's on your Bluetooth. So there's just different ways to consume our competitions at this point. So you know what that's going to look like. You know, you don't know, and you continue seeing and hearing the stories. I mean, Disney just came out. They're not going to Netflix. They're going to start their own. What does all that mean? Where's the Amazons? Where's the Netflix and the rest of them, the Googles of the world? Where do they come in? I'm not sure we know that answer yet.
Shane, Alan had a story the other day about season ticket sales, and there's been a little bit of a decline in recent years, but your final season numbers don't necessarily reflect that. But worried about season ticket sales, industry-wide problem?
I don't read Alan's articles, so I have no idea
I may
what
be
you're
the only
saying.
person who actually did. So.
I saw fake news. Yeah, it's fake news. You know, that's an athletic director. That's a concern. I mean, obviously that's your revenue source, and that's what you look at, and you try to look at the big picture. Why is there staying flat? I mean, we're coming off a 10-win season. You know, how do we continue to, you know, get our fans? And it's not only that. It's building this athletic department. And you know, I've talked to our department. I'll continue to talk about the department. Why not West Virginia? But I need help. I mean, it's just not us. It's West Virginia Mountaineer Nation that we're all in this together. We need the support. We need the tradition. You know, I want those fans year in and year out, and not look at, you know, they're going to win 8 games. They're going to win 10 games. I'm going to buy my tickets now, or I'm not going to. You know, let's support our athletes regardless of, and that's how you build those traditions of year in and year out. You know, I think we're competing against the big screen TVs at home. We continue to look at, you know, traffic patterns. We continue to look at in-house, you know, fan amenities to make that experience as great as possible. But it's all coming together. You know, I hope, you know, they don't look at this as just the West Virginia Athletic Department. This is West Virginia University. This is what the state of West Virginia. This is all of us together. That, you know, we think that we can do this. We know we can do it, and we have opportunities. And that's, you know, I started this by talking about, you know, not being just a one-year anomaly. You know, how do we continue to build? You know, how do we sit here and, you know, we break